Hello there, this is Avantish and today we are going to photograph a globular star cluster with my 5-inch Newtonian telescope from my light polluted city. So join along in this video where we will understand about globular clusters and take a beautiful picture of one. So Messier 5 or NGC 5904 is a globular cluster located in the constellation of Serpens catapult, which is a relatively faint constellation located close to the Milky Way's core. So this object is a globular cluster. So it is basically a star cluster. So there are generally two types of star clusters. One is an open cluster, which is a very simple star cluster. There are basically a few stars bounded by gravity. But a globular cluster is a spherical collection of and lots of really old stars. So Messier 5 happens to be one of the brightest globular clusters in the northern hemisphere. So this deep sky object was actually discovered by a German astronomer back in 1702, Gottfried Birch. So he observed this deep sky object with a very small telescope. So basically they use telescopes like these, a refracting telescope, the one that has a lens at the front and a massive tube where back here goes the eyepiece. So he used this kind of telescope and pointed it at the area of the Milky Way galaxy. So that area is actually where you can see the Milky Way's core. It's really bright, and there are a lot of bright deep sky objects and constellations too. So this astronomer described it as a nebula without stars, a fuzzy ball of light. He couldn't see all the stars in the cluster because many of them are faint, but he could see the glow of the cluster. And 62 years later, a French astronomer, Charles Messier, he observed this object with his 4-inch refractor, a similar kind of telescope, and he described it also a nebula without stars. Now, obviously the quality of optics wasn't that good, so it was very hard to observe back then. But these astronomers, despite that, managed to discover a lot of things. Charles Messier recorded his observation and stored it in the Messier catalog. And another 30 years later, astronomer William Herschel looked at this object and he was finally able to resolve the stars in this globular cluster. But this time he used a 40-inch reflecting telescope. So he was able to resolve most of the stars, and he knew that it was a cluster of stars. So now it's finally the time for me to go out and observe this mighty globular cluster, Messier 5. We have a clear night with a 70% illuminated moon, which is not a big problem at all because we are photographing a globular cluster, which is a bright object. So here we go. This is what it looks like so far. It looks incredible just with a single 1-second exposure, and I look forward to process lots of frames. So this is the final photograph. Around 1003 pictures, each holding 1.2 seconds of exposure time, were taken to get this image. You can see a lot of interesting details in the core right there. Globular clusters are really weird. Every time I look at one, I always have wondered, could there be life in one of these stars? And if there was, the aliens living on the planets would have spectacular views. However, is it really practical? Keep in mind that the average star density in a globular cluster is 0.6 to 0.8 light years. It basically means there can be hundreds to thousands of stars every 0.8 cube to 0.6 cubic light years, and the numbers can vary because in some globular clusters it goes as far as 0.1 light year with lots and lots of stars. For instance, the closest star to the Sun is 4.2 light years away, so that's several times further. Now the problem when these stars are so close to each other is the gravitational forces of each of these can have a significant impact on the way planets orbit a particular star. So assuming the conditions are right and you're at the edge of a globular cluster, a planet could have a stable orbit, a circular orbit, because that wouldn't cause the temperatures to be extreme. However, here's another thing. Most of the stars in a globular clusters are really old. So it is quite unlikely that you would find any gas and dust left over for planets to form. Once again, thank you so much as always for watching the video. And as always, keep looking up and keep learning.